Weight division, I've done the welterweight division, I've done the featherweight division, so we're moving on to the UFC's Bantamweight division, 135 pounds. I'm going to be giving you every fight I need to see made next in that division between the stacked contendership that we have going on right now. We already know what's going on with the title because Dominick Cruz versus Henry Cejudo was recently signed for UFC 249 on short notice. There's nothing I can do about that, so that's going to have to be the first matchup that we got to see next. Henry Cejudo versus Dominick Cruz. I'm glad it's Dominick Cruz getting the title shot over Frankie fucking Edgar, because I did not know that those two were competing for a title shot. Dominick Cruz and Frankie Edgar were both in... It's just madness to me, but that fight has been made. There's nothing more we can say about it. Dominick Cruz, Henry Cejudo, whatever. I'm sure it's going to be a fun fight, and it's a competitive fight for sure. It's not like Cruz is a guy who doesn't have it anymore. He's still the greatest bantamweight of all time. I'm okay with it. I've gotten over my ailments. I'm okay with this fight, and it's made, so there's nothing more I can do. But let's move on to the rest of the division that hasn't had fights signed and maybe is still up in the air. There are some fights signed on this card. However, I would like to see, starting with Marlon Moraes versus Petr Yan. That's the fight to make. If Petr Yan is not going to get a title shot instead of Dominick Cruz or Frankie Edgar, we're going to give him the number one contender, ensuring that the title fight will come next for Petr Yan. Petr Yan versus Marlon Moraes makes all the sense in the world for me. It gets a main event of its own fight night at UFC Kazakhstan, which was already signed and booked before this whole pandemic. So let's just redo how we were going to do things. Have that as the main event of a fight night in Kazakhstan. Let Petr Yan capture that Eurasian step of an audience that he needs so badly, being from Siberia and also being from China as well. If you look into his history, he can really captivate that market. So I'm glad that he's the main event of UFC Kazakhstan. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully the borders open back up between countries before we get to that stage, so that the Chinese fans of Yan and the Russian fans of Yan can go to that event. However, I do want to see that fight made next. I think it's an amazing fight. There's a lot of other fights that Petr Yan could take. A lot of people are talking about Yan versus Garbrandt. They're on two different levels right now in the division. Can we calm down? These are the two top contenders, not including another person who's going to be next on our list to break down a fight for. Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling versus Corey Sandhagen should take place next. It should be the co-main event of a great fight night. Get the spotlight it deserves, and I feel like this is a great time while we have Dominick Cruz versus Henry Cejudo for the Bantamweight World title to really marinate ourselves a great top contender. Because one of the best things to have in a division is have options. Yan versus Moraes. Aldo versus Sandhagen. Let's see who puts on a better show and captivates the audience more. I'd imagine if Yan wins, it's going to be Petr Yan because he seems to be the front runner right now. But listen, give Aldo and Sandhagen a chance. Hey, listen, if Yan versus Moraes is terrible or Moraes beats Petr Yan, all of a sudden Aldo and Sandhagen have a real good chance for the winner of that fight getting a next title shot. That's the incentive you should offer them. Tell them that. Give them a co-main event of a fight night. It's worthy of that position. Sandhagen versus Aldo makes all the sense in the world to me. I want to see those two square off with each other. Let's cancel out the top four contenders and figure out who's going to stink and who's going to swim. Those are the first four fights I want to see made first. Moving on. Down the division. Jesus, I'm gathering a lot of saliva here, boys. Moving on. Rafael Assunção is the next highest ranked guy in the division, and I think he should take on Pedro Munoz. Not the guy you were thinking of. I'll tell you where he fits into things later on, Mr. No Chin. Rafael Assunção versus Pedro Munoz. Two Brazilians. Do it in Brazil. Put them on the prelims or the headliner of the prelims of UFC Brazil. Adesanya versus Costa. Make that fight happen. Give them the spotlight on the headliner of the prelims. Assunção versus Pedro Munoz. Who's going to probably sink into irrelevance and who's going to stay relevant? Sounds good to me. Let's cancel out two Brazilians. Only one Brazilian can survive in a division that's not named Marlon Moraes. Moving on. Jose Aldo versus Cody Garbrandt. Are you... I'm just too good. I'm too good at this. Jose Aldo Jr. versus Cody Garbrandt. Are you... That's the fight to make, right? What's all this talk about Cody Garbrandt versus Rafael Assunção? I don't want to see that shit rebooked. We dodged a fucking bullet there. Let's make the most out of two big names that are coming off losses in the UFC's Bantamweight division. Jose Aldo, Cody Garbrandt. Put them on the main card of this Brazil card I keep talking about that hasn't even been made yet. Between Adesanya and Costa. Stick them on the main card. Aldo versus Garbrandt. Oh my... You're telling... That's the fight to make. I don't know why they originally made a Sansao versus Garbrandt. I guess because at the time, Jose Aldo was fighting for the title. But now, guess what? Jose Aldo is no longer fighting for the title. And if he's going to be fighting a contender, he wants the best guy and the biggest name that he can find. Cody Garbrandt is that biggest name that's the lowest risk in the division. Garbrandt versus Aldo, make the fight happen right away. That needs to happen right now. Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it? The winner of that one, tell them, hey, if you win this one, your next fight is going to be a title elimination bout between the winner of Aldo versus Sandhagen. Or, if Moraes beats Petr Yan, you say, hey, winner of Aldo versus Cody Garbrandt, the winner of Aldo versus Sandhagen is going to get the title shot because Moraes has won. But the winner of Aldo versus Garbrandt, you can get Moraes next. And we can maybe have an Aldo versus Moraes rematch to set the record straight. And that gives us some sort of storyline moving forward. And also, I'm sure Moraes would take that fight because he's the younger guy. I think he's assuming that Aldo's going to get worse with age. So if he wants to take the rematch, it's going to be easier than the first time. And that first fight was pretty close. Those are the fights I want to see mainly in the top of the division. But let's move on to the second half of the division. And we will begin with a guy coming off a loss in Jimmy Rivera. He should take on Marlon Vera. I'm sick and tired of Marlon Vera's recent opponents. Ray Borg, high risk, no reward. Eddie Wineland, high risk, no reward. He's beaten 5 guys in a row. He's finished all of them. Give him the jump up the rankings he deserves. And give Jimmy Rivera the tough up-and-comer that he deserves as well. How many more favours are we going to be doing Jimmy Rivera? He hasn't earned anything. He's lost over and over and over again. Let's give him Marlon Vera. That's how the divisions work. If you keep losing, you will take on an up-and-comer. Marlon Vera, in my opinion, is the most deserving person in the entire Bantamweight division outside of the top 10 to earn a shot up the rankings. Marlon Vera versus Jimmy Rivera needs to take place next. And I'm not just saying that because they both have Vera in their names. However, that's a very big reason. As you saw in my welterweight matchmaker video where I signed Jeff Neal versus Neil Magny. Names sounding the same is way more important than you guys think. Jimmy Rivera versus Marlon Vera. Just say that. Rivera versus Vera. It just sounds good. I could see it on a poster. Main card of a fight night. No more Marlon Vera on prelims. Let's give him a ranked opponent. I want to see him on the prelims of a pay-per-view. No more fight night prelims for Vera. Or a main card of a fight night. And that's final. Moving on down the division. Rob Font, coming off a big win over Ricky Simone. A close win as well. John Dodson, coming off a big win over Nathaniel Wood. Even though the stoppage was a little bit funny. I knew you guys knew I was probably going to say that and defend my Englishman. However, the stoppage was a bit funny. But you know what? He got the win. He knocked down Nathaniel Wood in a manner vicious enough for a referee to step in as Nathaniel Wood was getting back to his feet. However, he still won, and he deserves a reward. He took the fight against Wood in the first place, which deserves a reward in itself, in my opinion, regardless if he wins, because no one was taking that fucking fight. John Dodson, Rob Font, 2 guys coming off wins. The winner of that one can get another jump up the rankings, because they haven't quite done enough yet to get a jump up the rankings. But whoever wins this one, now we're talking. Now we're talking maybe the winner of the Sansao versus Munoz versus the winner of Rob Font versus John Dodson. Sign me up. That's what I want to see next. Moving on. Uriah Faber versus Frankie Edgar 2. I mean, come on. That's good matchmaking, right? You got 2 guys on their way out. Let's just have some fun with our matchmaking. Uriah Faber, coming off a loss. A bad one as well to Petr Yan. Only going to come back for fights that interest him. Why not do the fight between him and Edgar one more time? But just for old time's sake. Frankie Edgar, a nice little cushioning blow as an entrance to the 135-pound division. That's the co-main event of any fight night. They may even push it and try and make it a main event. I don't think they're going to. But that's a great fight. Uriah Faber versus Frankie Edgar, it works out for both of them. Let's do the rematch. Stop feeding these older guys to top contenders and offering them title shots so that the champion can make the most out of their name value. Let's just pair off these old veterans with each other. Uriah Faber, Frankie Edgar, 2. Make the fight right now. Moving on. Down the list, Cody Stamann versus Raoni Barcelos. Barcelos coming off some wins. I know he had a fight signed recently that got cancelled with this whole pandemic. I think it was actually with Cody Stamann. So let's just remake that fight. Cody Stamann versus Raoni Barcelos. Both guys technically coming off wins, even though Stamann's coming off a draw to Song Yadong. It should have been a win. I'm sure we're all in agreement there. Either way, Cody Stamann versus Raoni Barcelos is the fight I want to see made next. Both guys need one more. You got to put together a streak, and if you're Raoni Barcelos, you got to beat a ranked opponent first. This is your opportunity against a ranked opponent. Cody Stamann, number 10 or 11. I think he's number 11, I believe, or maybe number 12. And Raoni Barcelos is number 15. Let's pair off these two guys, and the winner of this one can get a jump up the rankings against maybe the winner of Jimmy Rivera versus Marlon Vera. It's all working together very well. I'm liking my list so far. Moving on. Song Yadong, speak of the devil, who earned himself a robbery draw, should be taking on Kang Hyo Kang, Mr. Perfect from Korea. Chinese versus Korea. Let's make an East Asian showdown between Song Yadong and Kang Hyo Kang. Make the fight happen right away. That makes a lot of sense to me. We go to Asia. We put Song Yadong versus Kang Hyo Kang on the main card. Kang Hyo Kang's coming off a 3-fight win streak, by the way, over Teruto Ishihara, someone else, and someone else. He's put together 3 wins in a row. Let's give him a jump up the rankings against a guy coming off a draw, and a gifted draw at that as well in Song Yadong. Great matchup to make. Favourable for Song Yadong as well, so I'm sure he would accept that one. Obviously, Kang Hyo Kang's got the risk factor. He wants to jump up the rankings. This is the jump that you're going to get against Song Yadong. China versus Korea. Namaste. Moving on. Sean O'Malley versus Brian Kelleher. You were waiting for me to mention Sean O'Malley the entire video. I know you guys were waiting for me to mention Sean O'Malley, and I think he should take on Brian Kelleher. I originally thought that Sean O'Malley should take on Montel Jackson. However, I'm a fan of what they did with Adesanya versus Costa. They didn't make the fight straight away. They waited until things got a little bit more interesting, and I don't want to bust a load too early here. I want to wait, let the fight marinate between the two top contenders and streaking contenders at bantamweight right now, between Montel Jackson and Sean O'Malley. Let's make it happen. Not now, but later on. Sean O'Malley versus Brian Kelleher. That way he gets a very dangerous opponent who just beat a streaking contender in Odie Osborne on the main card of UFC 246 McGregor versus Cowboy. Brian Kelleher is now a bigger name than he ever has been before. Let's make the most out of that between him and Sean O'Malley on the main card of a pay-per-view. Probably not, actually. Co-main event of a fight? Nah, I don't know, actually. I don't know where Sean O'Malley belongs. Because he's a big name, but at the same time, I'm very aware that this guy's had 3 fights in the UFC, and 2 of those wins aren't in the UFC anymore, in Andre Sukumtar and Terrion Ware. So let's give him one more. Can you win one more against a tough veteran in Brian Kelleher, who's been in fights with John Dodson, or John Lineker, sorry, not John, maybe even John Dodson as well, I don't quite remember, but John Lineker especially, he's been through those fights with those tough guys. He's faced top competition in the UFC Bantamweight division. He's now coming off a big win against Brian Kelleher, against Odie Osborne, sorry. Brian Kelleher, Sean O'Malley is the fight I want to see made next for Sean O'Malley. It makes sense. Let's take things slow. And it's the same reason for Montel Jackson as well, another tough contender. I don't want to see him take on these big names so early. We got time, and they've got favourable matchups that they can win, which leads me to the next fight I want to announce. Montel Jackson versus Eddie Wineland. Wineland was going to get a shot against Marlon Vera. Montel Jackson ain't getting shit, and neither is Sean O'Malley. Why is Eddie Wineland getting a ranked opponent with Marlon Vera? It makes no sense in the world. Eddie Wineland versus Montel Jackson is a great fight to make, and again, another tough veteran for our young up-and-comer to face against. This is something that neither of these guys have had so far. Jose Alberto Quinones was painted as a veteran, but he's a young guy who's just started his career. I believe he's 27 years of age, maybe even younger. Let's see these young contenders take on a veteran of the division that can show them a few tricks. You know, Sean O'Malley, let's see how he fights going backwards with a guy who's trying to take him down in Brian Kelleher and submit him. That's a challenge I'd like to see him face. Let's see how Montel Jackson deals with a tricky veteran in Eddie Wineland that knows how to play the game. Let's see what happens. Let's make these fights. Montel Jackson, Eddie Wineland. Sean O'Malley versus Brian Kelleher. Moving on. Ricky Simone should take on Alejandro Perez. Both guys coming off losses. Pretty self-explanatory, to be honest with you. They're both once former streaking contenders, now both coming off losses. Alejandro Perez should kind of be rewarded for his last performance. I know it was a great fight that he had, but either way, Ricky Simone versus Alejandro Perez, they're both coming off losses. You know exactly why I'm doing this fight. Let's see who stays around, let's see who doesn't. Moving on to more interesting ones. Brett Johns versus Merab Dvalishvili. Merab on a 2-fight win streak, grappling extraordinaire, the grappler of the division, another grappler of the division, Brett Johns. Let's see who the better one is. Brett Johns recently re-established himself with a big win over Miles Johns? Miles Bautista? Someone like that. He got a big win in his return to the octagon. Brett Johns versus Merab Dvalishvili is the fight I want to see made next. Two great grapplers. Two guys who need one more win before they get a jump up the rankings. They're each other's big win. Brett Johns, Merab Dvalishvili. Let's see how that grappling match goes down. Amazing. Amazing matchmaking from me once more. Nathaniel Wood versus Casey Kenny. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Nathaniel Wood coming off a loss. Casey Kenny coming off a loss. We good? We all understanding here? That's how things work. Both guys were on a bit of a streak in the UFC, I believe. Both guys were on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC. Now, both of them coming off a loss. Let's see who can establish himself. Let's see who's going to sink to the very bottom of the pile. Nathaniel Wood versus Casey Kenny can take on the winner of Ricky Simón versus Alejandro Perez. That's a little semi-final, unranked Grand Prix in the Bantamweight division is the way I like to see that one. Let's take these losers and see who's going to be able to reinvent their career over the next half a year. Okay, Ricky Simón, Alejandro Perez, Nathaniel Wood versus Casey Kenny. All guys coming off losses. The winners should face each other, and the winner of all of those bouts should be pushed forward as a reinvented character. Imagine if it was Nathaniel Wood versus Ricky Simón. Amazing. And then the winner of that one would have a lot more steam behind them and would be back on track towards the title shot. Moving on. Frankie Saenz versus Said Nurmagomedov. Amazing fight. Amazing fight to make. Frankie Saenz, a veteran. Said Nurmagomedov coming off a loss to Raoni Barcelos, a close fight as well. Let's pair the pair of them together. Said Nurmagomedov hopefully can get back on track. You know how valuable that Nurmagomedov name is. It seems to bring in a lot of ticket sales and hype just because he shares a name with a very famous fighter. I don't even think the pair of them are related. I believe he may be a cousin. They're all cousins, let's be real. It's a small cliffside over there in Dagestan. Not much variation going on. However, they're more inbred than yeast. Either way, we're moving on. Said Nurmagomedov versus Frankie Saenz. Next fight, Jack Shaw versus Journey Newson. Great one. Two guys coming off wins. I know Journey Newson recently had a win overturned because he tested positive for marijuana. We still doing that shit. Come on, he won fair and square and he KO'd the guy in the first round. Like, it's not like, oh, that marijuana sent that power into his hands. Like, I don't understand. Fair enough if he did kind of take a beating first, so some numbness in the body would actually benefit him. However, Jack Shaw, Journey Newson, two young contenders coming off big wins and finishes in their UFC debut. Jack Shaw versus Journey Newson. Sign me up. Jack Shaw was supposed to be fighting Geraldo de Freitas Jr., who isn't even on my list of matchups. He was coming off a loss. I don't want to see Jack Shaw fight someone coming off a loss. I want to see him fight a real challenge in Journey Newson, who's going to bring it and try and win. I don't want to see Jack Shaw versus some old veteran who's just still clinging on for dear life in his career. Jack Shaw versus Journey Newson. Make the fight happen next. And my last fight on the list, Randy Costa versus Benito Lopez. Both guys coming off wins. Both guys marketable. Let's make the fight happen. They should fight each other next. I know Randy Costa was basically saying that it would be irresponsible of him to try and fight during this whole pandemic. But listen, your bank's going to be calling you real soon because money doesn't just magic itself into your bank account, Randy Costa. So whether you like it or not, pretty damn soon you're going to have to make a decision. I'm spitting right now. I'm that angry. Make a decision, Randy Costa. Are you going to take up a part-time job in Walmart? I'll use an American phrase so people understand. Or are you going to fight again during this whole situation? You make the choice, Randy Costa. Randy Costa versus Benito Lopez is the last fight on my list. And that's the entire bantamweight division. Capiche? Good. See you later. Click that button there. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Good. Bye.